So last week I did a video showing how I set up Chiaki on the Steam Deck so that I could do PS5 remote play wherever I wanted and, play games like Spider-Man Miles Morales or The Last of Us or any of those other games that are still locked to the PlayStation ecosystem pretty much wherever I wanted as long as I was, relatively close to my PS5. And a little further back, I did sort of a fun comparison between the Switch and the Steam Deck, showing areas where I thought that the Switch was better than the Steam Deck, and then on the flip side, areas where I thought the Steam Deck was demonstrably better than the Nintendo Switch. And just like that video before, this is not meant to be some knockdown, drag-out fight declaring like one objective winner, because again, I think they're both amazing systems. Really, just like I did in that Switch video before, this is just meant to be a fun exploration of the pros and cons of both of these systems as well, and hopefully inspire some fun, hopefully friendly debate in the comment section. So with all that being said, let's just go ahead and jump right in. And let's start with the PlayStation 5, and one of the key areas where I think it really does win out over the Steam Deck is in the ability to just sort of jump in and play. Naturally, as somebody who has historically preferred the console experience to the PC gaming experience, one of the things that obviously the PS5 has over the Steam Deck, because it's not a full-blown PC or anything, is that it is a purpose-built machine that's just there for gaming. So the ability to just sort of jump in, fire up a game, or to quickly suspend and then resume a game is pretty top-notch on the PlayStation 5. Now don't get me wrong, the Steam Deck's no slouch in the speed department or anything like that. I'm just saying that when compared against the relative simplicity of a purpose-built device like the PlayStation 5, whose sole purpose is really just to play games, that of course it's going to be a little bit quicker to get to what you want to get to than trying to do so with what is basically a full-fledged PC that's kind of wearing a gaming handheld's costume. Plus, there's absolutely zero chance of me ever accidentally leaving the PS5 in a desktop mode like I can do on the Steam Deck, which might delay the ability for me to just go ahead and jump right into the gaming interface and fire up the game that I'm looking for in the way that I want to play it. Although to be fair, this definitely would have been possible during the PS3 era when you could install Linux on the PS3 natively. That was something you could do, and I definitely did do that, but in the modern age, that's, again, not something you're going to be able to do on the PlayStation 5, as it's just meant to get you into your gaming experience as quickly as possible. Next up, let's talk about comfort a little bit. Now, when pinning the deck against the Nintendo Switch, I found the deck to be much more comfortable on kind of having a larger profile that felt more like a traditional gamepad rather than the stripped-down buttons on the Switch's Joy-Cons where you had smaller analog sticks and the lack of a true D-pad, unless you got one of those left Joy-Cons that had a D-pad that was built into it. Or unless you opted to use something like the Split Pad Pro, which is a personal favorite for me when it comes to the Switch in portable play. But if I had to pit the comfort of the Steam Deck against the PlayStation 5's DualSense, the DualSense is going to win out for me every time. I mean, for starters, it's just lighter, and it's definitely more ergonomic than the Steam Deck's controls. And some areas where I think the DualSense shines in particular is in how it implemented its triggers and bumper buttons. L1 and R1 on the DualSense feel much better to me, and they are slightly easier to pull than they are on the deck. Plus, I do prefer the slightly mushier feel of R1 and L1 on the DualSense compared to the way clickier feel that they have on the Steam Deck. Plus, I find it a lot easier to flip my index finger between the bumpers and triggers on the DualSense thanks to those buttons being mostly flush with each other, whereas on the Steam Deck, the triggers are slightly more recessed, which means it's fairly easy to move from the bumpers to the triggers, but moving from triggers to buttons can feel a little bit awkward and take just a little bit more of a reach to get there. Plus, naturally, as I already mentioned, the DualSense is a whole lot lighter than the Steam Deck, considering it doesn't, have to shove a whole computer and a screen in there. Now, I realize this isn't exactly an apples-to-apples comparison, and that controller comfort is a really subjective thing. Plus, if you really think about it, you can pair whatever gamepad you want to with the Steam Deck in theory, including the DualSense 5. But in terms of just raw comfort and quick pick up and play, I would have to say that the DualSense wins out for me, again, every time. And while we're on the subject of controls, let's go ahead and talk about some of the unique feature advantages that the PS5 has in that department. Beyond the raw comfort of the DualSense, it also has like a range of unique features and enhancements that really just put it ahead of every other gamepad on the market for me right now. The adaptive triggers really do enhance the gameplay experience, and the haptic engine that they're using can communicate a bonkers range of tactile sensations to the player. Sure, the Steam Deck has haptic motors as well, but it's nowhere near as nuanced or advanced as what you can get out of the DualSense 5, and even when you just have basic rumble enabled for games, it's not nearly as pronounced as what you can get out of some of the competition. And while you can pair the DualSense with the Steam Deck, you won't always be able to take advantage of features like haptic feedback or adaptive triggers as reliably as you can on native PS5 games. And that's because support for both of these features is really mixed depending on what game you're playing on the deck. Some might support both, while some might support only one of them. Of course, talking about things like comfort or ergonomics or advanced features like haptic feedback or adaptive triggers really only matters in so much as you have a rad experience to take advantage of it, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the amazing PS5 exclusives. PlayStation exclusives are often pretty incredible, and really the best case scenario is that hopefully we'll get a timed exclusive situation where some amazing new release that just dropped on the PS5 will hopefully eventually make its way to the PC where it can be enjoyed on deck as well. For instance, both Days Gone and Death Stranding came out in 2019, but we didn't see them make their way to the PC until almost 2 years later in 2021. And we saw the same thing with God of War in 2018, where it didn't make its way to PC until 2022. And while it's cool that any of these games make their way over to PC, the truth is a whole lot more still remain locked to the PlayStation ecosystem. Games like Little Big Planet, Infamous, Ghost of Tsushima, Gran Turismo, or Demon's Souls might make their way to PC at some point, but you probably shouldn't hold your breath, and if it's really important to you to have those experiences, you're probably better off jumping to a PS5 than holding out hope that maybe eventually it will come to PC. I mean, it might, but there's really no guarantee. And finally, the last area where I think the PS5 has a demonstrable advantage, even though this is a little bit nitpicky, is in how much easier it is to just sort of connect with friends, jump into a party, and have a multiplayer experience that you're looking for. And honestly, this is just kind of an extension of the fact that, again, the PS5 is kind of a purpose-built machine for gaming, whereas the Steam Deck is a full-blown PC that has a lot more to consider in that area. And one of the areas where this really stood out to me recently was when I went to play some Phasmophobia with some friends on the Steam Deck. I had a couple of friends who I had not yet added as Steam friends, and when I went to add them, I couldn't just search for their name very easily within the Steam Deck itself, or at least I did not find it, and I really just had to enter their friend code, which was surprised me because that felt like more of a Nintendo thing, whereas I was used to just kind of like searching for someone's PSN ID natively on, the PlayStation app or directly in the PS5 interface and finding who I wanted to connect with very easily. And the reason I say this is nitpicky is because honestly it is just like the tiniest inconvenience, right? Not the end of the world or anything like that, but it does add an extra layer of friction that kind of stops or at least slows me down from getting to where I want to be. And I think over time, those small moments of inconvenience and friction really add up and subconsciously make you prefer one system over another. So that's just one area where I found the PS5 was a little bit easier or more desirable, I guess I should say, for me to play than doing that same process on the Steam Deck. But now let's take a look at a few areas where I think the Steam Deck outshines the PS5, and I think the first and most glaringly obvious is in flexibility. Clearly the Steam Deck is a more capable system than the PS5 when it comes to customizing the type of gaming experience that you want to enjoy. Because of its portable nature, you can take it anywhere, or if you want to have the big screen experience, you can do that too. Now, how well the big screen experience plays out is a matter of some debate, again, because I've had some questionable experiences going into dock mode, but still, by nature of its form factor and the fact that they took this very Switch-like approach where you could either play it portably or switch into dock mode, no pun intended, to kind of, again, have that big screen experience, makes it a very flexible system to allow you to, again, indulge games the way it makes sense to you. Throw in the fact that you compare just about any modern controller or PC peripheral with the Steam Deck, and really it comes out as kind of a Swiss Army knife of gaming experiences. Because again, for all intents and purposes, it is a fairly powerful PC, albeit one that's just been squished down into that handheld form factor that provides abilities far and beyond what you get from other consoles. Now, I've already said that the deck is definitely more comfortable than the Switch, but I think decidedly less comfortable than the PS5's DualSense. But what the standard deck controls lack in ergonomics or comfort, they more than make up for in terms of flexibility. Beyond the standard setup of 2 triggers, 2 bumpers, 4 face, 3 context buttons, a couple of sticks, and a D-pad, it also has 2 extra sets of rear paddles, 2 haptic-enabled touchpads, and touch-sensing analog sticks, which can be really helpful for instantly enabling things like gyro mode for aiming. And you don't even have to manually remap everything, since you can just load up a ton of popular community layouts with the touch of a button. Now obviously this is a bit of a necessity for PC games that might just inherently demand more complex control schemes, but that also means that experiences you might play on a console like Bloodborne in my case can be fine-tuned much more easily to suit your preferred control layout. Now to be fair, it's not impossible to augment the functionality of a DualSense controller, right? But to do so you would probably have to do something like get a mod kit that would allow you to add extra buttons to a standard DualSense controller, or do what I did where you take the plunge on a hideously expensive third-party controller with something like the Scuff Reflex, which admittedly is pretty rad, but it comes at a premium. Meanwhile, the Steam Deck has a range of options baked in on both a hardware and software level, so if you have any special requirements for how you game, there's a good chance the deck can accommodate your particular playstyle. And speaking of being a PC, even though I mentioned that Sony has its own stable of exclusives for the PS4 and PS5 that make it really appealing, the deck gets you access to some pretty awesome PC exclusives. Now that doesn't mean every one of those PC exclusive experiences is always some big AAA mouse and keyboard fare, but it often means really cool indie titles like Vampire Survivors will show up on PC first, before eventually getting ported over to console. So no, you're probably not going to get something like Spider-Man Miles Morales right out of the gate, but the next indie darling turned mega hit is almost certainly going to hit PC first, and with the deck there's a good chance you can get in on that action early. But probably the most direct and disrespectful advantage I would say that the Steam Deck has over the PlayStation 5 is that for many of PlayStation games, particularly those pre-PS5 and PS4 and the PS1, 2, and 3 era, I can actually get those experiences onto the deck easier than I can by using any of Sony's official services to get that experience on a modern PS4 or PS5. Now granted, it would take you some tinkering to get to that place, and honestly it's a little bit hit or miss once you get up to that PS3 era, but still, by and large, for most of the games that I personally would have loved to play on the PS2, I can load up almost anything that I want to on the Steam Deck and it will play just fine. Not to mention the deck enables me to take a lot of those experiences on the go, which is absolutely awesome, particularly if I want to indulge in a early 2000s console era nostalgia. So yeah, to kind of wind this whole thing down, again, not looking to have a knockdown, drag out console war here or anything to declare, some clear winner between the two because they're both amazing systems, but rather I really did just want to take like a nuanced look at some of the things that I consider most when I choose what game system I'm going to play at any given point, and really take a look at some of the pros and cons of both of those platforms. So what do you think? Are there any advantages that I left out for either of these systems? If so, I would love to hear your perspective on it. Let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch the videos. It means a lot to me. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.